everybody. Welcome back. I'm here and I'm very grateful that Dr. Dirk Stanley is here with us. Hi, Dirk.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. I want to just introduce you, and please correct me if I'm wrong. He's a Chief Medical Information Officer, and he's a physician informaticist
Yep.
out in Massachusetts, in Northampton.
Yep. Northampton, Mass. Yep.
Okay. And he's board certified in internal medicine and also in clinical informatics. He's a physician leader. He's a design thinker. He's a social media guru. I need to learn from him. And he also is passionate about clinical workflow design. So Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I had the honor of speaking with Dirk before, and there's some really key features of leadership that I'd love for you guys to hear from him. He's so knowledgeable in these areas, and one of them is on the workflow design. Can you tell us about what that means, clinical workflow design, and how we can be part of that as physicians?
Yeah, so I got into clinical workflow during my first 3 years as a CMIO. I've been doing this for now almost, I guess, about 13 years. And my first 3 years, I would build stuff as part of my informatics role, I would build stuff in the electronic medical record. But I started to realize that things didn't go always as planned. Sometimes we would spend all this time building order sets that nobody really liked to use, or we would build order sets that suddenly, within an hour or two of putting them into the live system, we had to suddenly take out because either the charges weren't working or, people really hated it. I always like this example when you have the angry mob outside your door, like, what the heck were you doing putting that into the system? And I started to ask myself, what happens when you have unexpected outcomes with these build things? And I started to realize that there actually is a method to the madness, that, what we're doing when we configure electronic medical records is we're putting the steps into place to help people do their jobs. That's really what it's about. And that's what workflow is about. And figuring out the steps, when doctors...
That's really interesting. Dirk, can you give us an example of how you've done that already and how that's helped? Mm-hmm.
Yep. So good example. So with my former employer, I was getting a lot of complaints about unfractionated IV heparin, and especially from the doctors. They were like, "Oh God, I hate ordering it. It's so complicated, and I have to click so many times." And the nurses were always complaining that they weren't sure when to titrate it, and how to document the titration. So we redesigned the entire workflow from soup to nuts, from beginning to end. With all the stakeholders, the physician role for ordering the therapy, the pharmacy role for dispensing the drug, the laboratory role for monitoring the therapeutic levels, and the nursing role for titrating it. And we had a whole design team with representatives from those 4 key areas, and we really looked at a very granular level. What is their role in this? And it's almost like choreographing a dance. You really need to understand what each person is doing and how they interact. And then once you understand how they interact to achieve the therapeutic goal, then it becomes very easy to design in a very intuitive, easy, understandable, and safe way. A lot of our discussion was also about, if somebody forgot to do a step, how could you identify that they forgot it early enough so that you would prevent harm to the patient. And so we built a lot of safety into it, all kinds of allergy checking and age checking and dose range checking, and also other safeguards for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia and other things. So it gave the users enormous confidence when they had something that really they understood and it fit what they were trying to do. And it all flowed in a very logical way. So when we redesigned it, it was adopted as a best practice, and it's still in use today. As we're interviewing, it's being used to treat acute coronary syndrome and pulmonary embolism. So
that is awesome.
Yep.
How do you learn how to do something like that? Is something that you learned by yourself through experience, or were there books that you read or classes that you took? How do you learn that?
I've read and Googled, and there are some fantastic leaders on Twitter and the internet. Chuck Webster is a nationally known physician who does workflow design. But a lot of it was sort of trial and error, and realizing that when we had unanticipated outcomes, it usually was because of we missed something that was very important to the user, the person who was trying to do their job. You know, if you don't plan effectively, then that's when unexpected outcomes usually happen.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. The other question I had is, we talked about this before. I thought this is really interesting. Is how do you run a successful meeting in healthcare, and when you know it's not going right?
Oh yeah, well that's another thing through trial and error. In my first couple of years as a physician leader, my first committee I was ever asked to chair was the CPOE committee, which is tasked with trying to get, I call it trying to herd the cats, trying to get people to agree on what the best practice is and, you know, what standard that they're going to adopt as a group. And, you know, it can be a fairly contentious discussion. Sometimes you have, you know, the doctors heading in one direction, the nurses heading in a different direction, and pharmacy heading in a different direction. So, so I learned, you know, in my first couple of years, sometimes I would get feedback from people who would say, you know, Dirk, you know, I know everybody means well, but I felt like I didn't get to say what was, you know, my opinion. Like I felt like I didn't have a voice during the meeting. And, you know, I really thought about that. Like why, you know, how do you, when you have people with different opinions, how do you organize them, and how do you get them to, you know, hear each other and work towards solutions? And I was at a different meeting. I was at one of our medical executive meetings, and there was a physician there who was talking about quorum. And you know, I was wondering, like, quorum, you know, what is that? Something with how many people you need to run the meeting. But, you know, I asked him, you know, about that, and he said, oh, you know, it's from like student government, you know, Robert's Rules of Order. And I thought, Robert's Rules of Order, wait a second, what is that again? So I looked it up, and sure enough,
Wait, are you talking about this book?
Yes, that's the book. That's the same. Yep.
This is the book that you told me to get. I haven't read it yet. It's not that thick, so that's good. There's three versions of this.
That's
right?
And that's actually that's my favorite version, because it gives you both. If you want, you can read it and just have a very quick summary, but if you want, you can use it as a reference book for, you know, more detailed questions. You don't have to read every. I would say the first 3 chapters is really will get you a tremendous amount of mileage when you're trying to meet with you know, other physicians and nurses. But you know, it's a book about basic parliamentary procedure, and the book itself isn't necessarily for healthcare, but you can use it in any situation, from running a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout troop to you know, running a meeting with like 500 you know, doctors who are discussing a very, you know, contentious issue. And so it's a phenomenally helpful book to understand how do you run an effective meeting? How do you write an agenda? How do you charter a committee? How do you even know who the right people are to bring to the meeting? These are all really, really important to make sure that that people's voices are being heard, and that you're documenting it correctly, and that you're planning effectively. And once you know how to write an effective agenda, you can get a lot of work done really, really quickly. And that's why it's a really helpful book.
I love it. So if you guys want to look at it one more time, Robert's Rule of Order, right here, okay, in brief. They have a made simple, or even a thinner book than this. I don't know if you saw that one, but I was going to buy that because it's for dummies or something. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I love these pearls that you've been giving. Where else can we find out more information? Because I think you said you had a blog. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, yep. So I blog. You can visit me on my blog, www.dirkstanley.com. You can also find me on Twitter @DirkStanley. You know, those are probably the easiest ways. I'm also on Facebook, so a lot of different ways of finding me.
What kind of content do you have on your blog that would be useful for a lot of physicians out there?
So I blog about workflow design, and I blog about how to make things go the way you want them to go. So, and there are a lot of pearls, things that I've learned over the last 13 years of, you know, how clinical operations are formed, how, you know, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists, everybody works together to take care of the patients. And, you know, I have a lot of helpful tips for physician leaders who are just starting to understand, when you're in a physician leadership role, you want to be in control of those processes, or at least be able to help shape them. And so I share secrets of how to shape your workflow.
Wow, thank you so much, Dirk. Thank you. This has been really, really special. You're a great speaker too, and you make me laugh. And you're talking about musical orchestras, and you told to me before about gourmet cooking and getting me all hungry. Thank you so much.
You're
I hope
very
to
welcome.
have you back sometime to teach us some more things in the future. Take care, and hope to talk to you soon. Okay.
All right, my pleasure.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.